Welcome, welcome. I am excited to lead my first meeting of the Borough Board for the Borough of the Bronx. I am Vanessa L. Gibson, your Bronx Borough President. And before we begin, I want to welcome each and every one of you. Thank you to BronxNet for making sure that this is live streamed so we are able to capture this meeting this morning. I hope everyone is healthy, well, and safe. My team and I are excited to lead this month's Borough Board meeting, and I first and foremost want to begin on a note of solidarity. Last Sunday, we learned that Hurricane Fiona hit the island of Puerto Rico, and since that time has traveled to the Dominican Republic, Turks and Caicos, and now we're learning it is on the island of Bermuda. And so I'm just asking everyone if you could just lift up the residents and families, our brothers and sisters and our neighbors. As New Yorkers, we always step up in times of need, and this is no exception. 5 years ago, when Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, we stepped up in a major way, all levels of government. It is a painful reminder that many of our islands are in serious need of federal support and priority and capital and infrastructure investments. But once again, they are brothers and sisters, and they are our neighbors and loved ones. And so I'm just asking everyone to lift up those families in your thoughts and in your prayers. We will be in touch with updated information as we receive it from organizations that are trusted partners on the ground that are doing a triage and assessments for many of the residents and parts of the island of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic to determine what the real needs are, working with the government, from the governor as well as many of the mayors. And so we will share all of that information as we receive it, and we encourage all of you to share that within your networks. It has been a challenging time, but 9 months in office serving as the Bronx Borough President, I'm very excited, I'm very grateful, I'm very humbled. And it's a little emotional being here because my political mentor and my political mother, who gave me my start, who lifted me up as she climbed the ladder, the late, great Aurelia Green, sat right here and ran these Borough Board meetings every single month. And so sometimes when I look at some of the previous really recorded videos, and I see her with a smile and her gray hair and, you know, leading Borough Board, it's really emotional, and I know that she's very proud of me. And to be in this seat, to sit here where she sat for 8 years serving under Ruben Diaz Jr.'s administration is really a surreal moment for me. So I just wanted to share that because I think all of you know what Aurelia Green meant for me. And what she meant to this borough, and to sit in this seat for such a time as this is really an important moment for me and my administration. So I thank you all for being here today. So officially, we are starting our meeting 10:30 a.m. Thursday, September 22nd, 2022, pursuant to Chapter 4 of Section 85 and Chapter 69, Section 2706 of the New York City Charter. A joint meeting of the Bronx Borough Service Cabinet and Bronx Borough Board is taking place today, Thursday, September 22nd, 2022, beginning at 10:30 at 198 East 161st Street on the 3rd floor in our conference room. We're going to begin with our roll call and attendance to make sure that we recognize all of those who are here with us this morning, our district managers, our community board chairs, as well as our local council members and their representatives. So I will begin with Community Board 1.
Arlene Parks, Chair, President. I'm sorry. I think they're going to, for BronxNet, they're going to need to speak into the mic.
Okay, sure.
Anna Rojas, Community Coordinator.
Okay. Community Board 1, Arlene Parks, Board Chairperson.
Anna Rojas, Community Coordinator.
And Anna Rojas, Community Coordinator, Community Board 1.
Ada, speak into the microphone, please.
Community Board 2,
Not present.
okay, not present. Community Board 3.
Etta Ritter, District Manager of Bronx Community Board 3.
Okay. Okay. All right. I joined too. All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Ritter. Community Board 4.
Paul Phillips, District Manager, Community Board 4.
Community Board 5.
Good morning, Madam Borough President. Ken Brown, the District Manager of Community Board 5.
Thank you. Community Board 6.
Good morning, Rafael More Panet, District Manager, Board 6.
Thank you. Community Board 7.
Good morning, Jade Guzman, District Coordinator for BXCV7.
Thank you. Community Board 8.
Laura Spalter, Chair, Community Board 8, and
Good morning, Kira Gannon, District Manager, CB8.
Great, thank you. Community Board 9.
Good morning, Shirley San Andres Alonso, Deputy District Manager on behalf of CB9.
Good morning, Loretta Ramperos, District Director for CB9.
Great, thank you. Community Board 10. Just checking, okay, not present. Community Board 11. Okay, not present. Community Board 12.
Hi, good morning. Beatrice Coronel, Chair of Bronx Community Board 12.
Thank you.
Good morning, George, Community Board 12.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now we'll begin with our members of the City Council. Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala, District 8.
Good morning, Stephanie, Outreach Coordinator for Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you. District 11, Councilmember Eric Dinowitz.
Good morning, Constituent Advocate to Councilmember Eric Dinowitz.
Thank you. District 12, Councilmember Kevin Riley.
Good morning, everyone. Simone Jones, Chief of Staff for Councilmember Riley.
Thank you. District 13, Councilmember Marjorie Velasquez.
Good morning, everyone. Stephanie Rodriguez, Constituent Liaison on behalf of Councilmember Velasquez.
Thank you. District 14, Councilmember Pierina Sanchez. Not present. District 15, Councilmember Oswald Feliz. Not present. District 16, Councilmember Althea Stevens.
What's going on, y'all? Tyreek Israel, Deputy Chief District Director for Councilmember Althea Stevens.
Thank you. District 17, Councilmember Rafael Salamanca Jr. Not present. District 18, Councilmember Amanda Farias.
Good morning, everyone. Marco Luna, Assistant Director of Constituent Services, Councilmember Amanda Farias.
Thank you so much. So we are all set. Okay. Okay, great. And I also want to recognize that we have representatives of our city agencies, and once we complete our presentations for the morning, we will ask all of our city partners to identify themselves, as well as the agencies that they represent. So we have a packed agenda for you this morning. Please make sure you take notes. We are going to begin with our first topic on newly arrived asylum seekers. We're going to be providing an update for all of you, for our district managers and board chairs and staff members and council members. And we have with us our Deputy Commissioner of External Affairs for the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, Miosotis Munoz. We also have our Deputy Commissioner of External Affairs for the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs, Valerie Vasquez, as well as on behalf of the Department of Social Services, we have Jocelyn Bennett, as well as our former Deputy Borough President of the Bronx, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs for the New York City Department of Social Services, Marika Scott. So we are asking all of you to please join us at the podium and provide an update for all of us on asylum seekers on behalf of the administration. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Come on up. Good. Absolutely. Good morning. I'm Marika Scott. I know most of you in the room, and I'm happy to be here again.
in front of you in a different capacity, but certainly always serving the Bronx. And so what we're going to talk about today is our new arrivals here, and under the best of circumstances, we would have had a presentation available for you, but I think that what works right now, because we have such a moving target and we know that there's so many questions, that we'll just take questions or really speak to the issues that I know the borough president has made this a topic that she's particularly interested in and wants to bring us here. So we want to give you as much information as possible, and to that end, we would like to collectively take your questions and speak to some of those really rapidly changing things. And as I said, because it's rapidly changing, today we have answers for you, but this is a model that it's moving. We're really trying to take into account all of the many needs of our asylum seekers, and so tomorrow we may have to pivot and move again, and we're welcome to well, I shouldn't say we're welcome, I should say we're very happy. It's my mommy voice. I can talk again and be with you again and update you as many times as needed. I'll turn it back.
Thank you so much, Marika. Any of your team want to provide remarks as well before we do Q&A? Miosotis or Valerie? Jocelyn?
Yes, let me just again introduce myself. Thank you so much, Madam Borough President. Miosoti Munoz from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant. And I'm also here with my colleague, Deputy Commissioner Valerie, and I will just share with you more about what we've been. So Tom, first, just to give you a background as to when we started working with the asylum seekers, what we're doing now, and how we hope to work with you and work with you in the community to make sure that in collaboration we are able to provide the highest level of service. And now I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague, Deputy Commissioner Valerie.
Thank you very much. Thank you to my colleagues. Thank you to Madam Borough President and to all the leaders in the room for your respective leadership on all items as it relates to the Bronx. I wanted to acknowledge Paula, one of our wonderful borough directors you all have a relationship with. We are really here said to answer your questions, but to lean on you for your leadership and your expertise within your respective communities. You know that this situation that we're dealing with is clearly a humanitarian crisis, all hands on deck, and if you do have any recommendations of any churches or community-based organizations that could provide resources or assistance, please connect with your borough directors as well. So we're here to answer any questions. We will continue to be present, and we just wanted to keep the dialogue going. So thank you, Madam Borough President, for the invitation, and we look forward to working with all of you.
Now, just to give you some background on our office and our hands-on approach, we, as many of you know, this is a matter that started, I would say, Tom is here to correct it, in April when we heard that asylum seekers were being bused, and it was very much something that started in Texas, as many of you know, and a lot of the asylum seekers that were coming to New York, we just happened to notice the numbers growing sometime in July, as far as the numbers of asylum seekers coming into the homeless shelters. At that point, the Office of Immigrant Affairs, through the leadership of Commissioner Manuel Castro, we put together a team working in collaboration with local advocates to make sure that this humanitarian crisis that's affected predominantly a lot of the asylum seekers are from Venezuela. Because of the crisis there, it's certainly led to the travel across the border. And as my Deputy Commissioner colleague Valerie mentioned, it is a humanitarian crisis. Yes, and in August, we at Immigrant Affairs working with local leaders and advocacy groups, went to the Port Authority. And thanks to the leadership of Mayor Adams, a lot of these asylum seekers were just being dropped off all over the city. And a lot of these buses that were not scheduled to be even at Port Authority, and in work the state with the, of course, our governor, these buses were now able to come in through Port Authority, but unfortunately, we can never predict when they're going to come in. All we can say is we are here to make sure that we are able to now, thanks to the leadership of our mayor, Mayor Adams, and Commissioner Castro, have what's called a navigation center. And I would like to share with you more information on what the navigation center does. The Asylum Seeker Navigation Center is a central place where newly arrived asylum seekers can go for free and confidential help, and is able to assess the important services and resources that are needed to help the asylum seekers thrive in New York City, but also help them navigate, because some have families elsewhere and they're coming here for the first time. And just to give you a little background as to what we've faced on the ground, a lot of these families that were put on these buses, they didn't even know they were coming to New York. Some of the asylum seekers had appointments for the to seek refugee status at different states. And just to give you a short example, we've had families says, "Is this Oregon?" We're like, "No, this is not Oregon." Or, "Is this Miami? Because I have an appointment for the Department of Homeland Security to plead my case." And they're like, "No, this is not Miami." And this is why, again, it is such a crisis, and it is our job to provide services to communities in need. And certainly, this is an immigrant community that is very much in need. So the Navigation Center helps in so many ways, because if some of these families want to reconnect with their loved ones, even in other states, we're there for them. If some of these asylum seekers need help in terms of how do they integrate and get the appropriate information so that they're not victimized in any way, we're there at the Navigation Center. And just to give you more information as to the services that are being provided, the resources, they're free. They're very much confidential. We don't ask any questions of anyone whether your document. It's not a question that we will ever ask. So the information is very much confidential. It is not shared with any other agencies. And with that being said, just to give you more information, we help connect not only with the services, but also once the families come into the Navigation Center, they're able to receive a confidential interview in their preferred language. We at Immigrant Affairs manage over 200 languages, and it is a trained case manager that is able to provide the necessary assessment. We have very much trusted professional contractors, representatives of city agencies that are required by law to provide this confidential information and be able to identify and help connect with the necessary services. Some of the information and the services that we provide are healthcare referrals. We have H&H, which is the Health and Hospitals, present to provide support. We also have the healthcare insurance enrollment, New York Cares, to make sure that continued services in health is provided, mental health counseling, just to name a few. School enrollment, DOE, is available. It's almost like the notion of the medical home where all the services are provided in one central location. IDNYC to provide ID to the families, because you will need ID to get in and out of governmental buildings. This is very much needed. And immigration legal services, which Tom will speak more as to the kind of services they get if they need help getting a new appointment, because like I mentioned, they were sent here with very little information, and it is the work that we do day to day with the support that we get from our sister and our partnering agencies, the assistance that we're also getting at so many different community advocates. Just and now that I have CAU here as well, we have our faith-based partnership and office that is led by Pastor Monroe, and the churches have been just phenomenal. We know that the numbers are growing of asylum seekers, and we just met with over 200 churches, and so many of these church leaders are saying, we will take families, we will help with working to help, not only help the families, but also work in collaboration with our governmental agencies to make sure that the families have this support. It is a humanitarian crisis. We do rely on everyone's help. We thank everyone who is involved, from our city, state, and federal partners to also on the ground, the faith-based community, the community-based organizations. And what we do in terms of immigrant affairs is to be that glue, to be that bridge, and to continue to make sure that there is no gap in services. Again, who are the individuals that can access these services? I will let Tom, who is our legal expert, who's been leading the effort very much on the ground, at the Port Authority, at the Navigation Center, and he's been such a champion. So I will pass the mic over to my colleague, Tom, and he will share with you more information, and we'll be very pleased to take any questions and to continue to stay in contact with everyone, just to make sure that we will be able to service as we do as New Yorkers in goodwill, and to provide the highest level of service and the most effective services as needed. Here's Tom.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Munoz, for those kind words and for gathering us, and thank you all for having us here. I can briefly describe the operations of the Navigation Center in more detail, including eligibility, and then answer any questions that you might have about that operation. So the Asylum Seeker Resource Navigation Center is located at 520 West 49th Street. It's in the American Red Cross New York Regional Headquarters building. We're on the 3rd floor there, and we are looking to expand to another floor. Services are available via appointment only. However, we always work with walk-ins to make sure that they can access the services as well, if not that same day with a follow-up appointment. To be eligible for an appointment, the individual must reside in New York City and have immigration paperwork that shows that they've arrived to the United States through the U.S. Southwest border on or after January 1st, 2022. Part of the initiative involves citywide satellite sites that are being stood up now across the 5 boroughs. We should be able to announce the locations of those soon and what services will be offered there. But resources and services won't just be located in Midtown West at that resource center. They're going to be citywide and coordinated. We'll be building on that going forward. And as previously mentioned, this is an evolving response. And as we learn more, and as we learn more about our response, we're modifying in order to make sure that it meets the needs of all New Yorkers that need it. At the center, we have case management, which is an initial interview, as Deputy Commissioner mentioned. Catholic Charities of New York is contracted as the case management provider and to oversee service operations at the center. And from the case management interview, the case manager assesses the individual's needs, then helps connect them with everything there. Full medical consultations, school vaccinations, school enrollment. There are some provided goods like diapers, connections to family enrichment centers. We have IDNYC full enrollment. We have Fair Fares there, providing half-off Metro cards. And we have Metro Plus and others connecting to health insurance, DOHMH and their team is there providing crisis mental health services and then connections to follow-on mental health care. And then we have the legal operation. Currently, the legal operation is staffed with redeployed staff from existing city contracts, and basically that's how this whole thing has had to work because, you know, it's been such a quickly evolving need, an emerging need, that to hire a new staff to staff it is impossible. So we've been redeploying existing staff while we hire and build up through the back of the response. But legal services include a basic orientation to the legal process and seeking asylum, as well as assistance changing address and changing venue where necessary or helpful, given that, as Mia Soti said, a lot of individuals have incorrect addresses on their forms placed there by a CBP at the border. So we're trying to make sure that the need is immense, 13,000 people, and providing them all with the proper guidance is an immense challenge, but I've been, just being in the middle of it, heartened by everyone that's come together, across agencies, across the city, to support, and demonstrating how you do it as a city. To care for others who are in a special need. So I'll pause there and take any questions that you have. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Before we begin questions, let me do a little bit of an overview and first thank and acknowledge all of you for your incredible work. And you know, the reason why we have this presentation for this time is because of the fact that this is happening right now. You're hearing a lot of stories, you're seeing a lot of media attention being given to asylum seekers and migrant families that are coming into the city of New York. So I thought it was very, very important for DSS and Moya to be here and talk about what is happening on the ground, because there are decisions being made almost every day that are going to impact this city and, most importantly, the borough of the Bronx. Every single community board and council district is here, and we want to make sure we're asking these questions. So first and foremost, I just want everyone to understand that the reason why we are in this situation, as Mio Sotis mentioned, since April, is because we are seeing an influx of asylum seekers coming in from places like Texas and Florida and other places. But New York City is required by a 1981 right to shelter decree that was put into law based on litigation that mandates that the city of New York provides temporary shelter to anyone coming into our shelter system. That's single adults, men and women, how you identify, as well as families. And so that is the reason why when people ask you questions, well, why are we housing these families? Why are we helping them so much? Because we are mandated by the law to do so. And since 1981, 40 years ago, that has not changed. And so that's another conversation for another day. But for the moment right now, on this day, we are following the 1981 right to shelter decree. And so what that means are any of the families that are coming in, most likely through Port Authority, they're coming in on buses, and I just want all of you to understand the magnitude of these numbers. Tom said 13,000 individuals and families since April. We are only in September, and every single weekend we see buses, plural, not singular, coming into Port Authority. We did hear there was talk about some coming into JFK and other places, but I think they may have gone to Martha's Vineyard because I know the governor of Florida is doing that. But for the most part, our asylum seekers are coming into this system via bus. And so when they come in and they go to the navigation center, what I want to make sure that we do as a borough is, number one, we're very understanding, we're very compassionate, and we are sympathetic to what is happening. As a borough, we have done our part more than once. We have done our fair share. We have opened our communities for the purposes of shelters for singles and families. We've done a lot and much more. And so many of our neighborhoods today are already inundated and saturated. Let me first say that. And so if we are asking this administration to consider our borough and what we have endured and making sure that this is a shared responsibility. The Bronx is one borough of 5, right? We can't shoulder a city-wide problem. Everyone has to do their part. So there have been lots of conversations, and I just want to make sure all of you know that as your borough president, I am doing my best to have conversations with the team on what we can do. Because some sites may work, some sites may not. And because of this emergency status, the notifications we normally get is not going to be adhered and honored because of this circumstance. These are not permanent locations, right? They are temporary, but the challenge for us is how long is temporary, right? And so some of the initial questions that come to mind for me are when the buses arrive at Port Authority and the families, the single adults, as I understand, some may go to Bellevue, 30th Street, some may come to Path in the Bronx, which is the only intake for all homeless families in New York City, come to the Bronx in Community Board 4 at Path, right? So that's one burden already that we have. But think about the services that many of these families and individuals require. Think about what they have endured to get here in terms of the trauma, in terms of the victimization, victims of crime, sexual assault, domestic violence, gender-based violence, everything under the sun. And they're coming here with their children trying to find a better life. And so, of course, we're sympathetic. We just want to make sure this is done in a strategic and a responsible way. From education services, social services, trauma-informed care, the literacy services. Many of them are undocumented. They need visas. They need working documents. They need a wealth of help and support. And so that's what the Navigation Center is doing, triaging and assessments. And so I want to thank you, and certainly if you could just answer just 2 questions for me. When families and single adults arrive, where do they go from the Port Authority? Are they going to Bellevue Men's Shelter? Are they going to Path? How do they get to the Navigation Center? And then what happens? Walk us through the process when they go to these entities. How long are they there before they're sent out to a commercial hotel? Because as you all understand, our homeless families today that are native New Yorkers, we are not forgetting about them. They feel like they're on the back burner because no one's talking about them. We're talking about asylum seekers. And so I want to assure all of you on behalf of the administration that we are prioritizing our existing shelter families today that have been in shelters for months during the pandemic. They're in tier 2s, they're in apartment buildings, they're in apartments, right? And so those are already overwhelmed. So the situation that we're confronted with now are the commercial hotels that we got out of because of the conditions that we now have to return to. Not that we want to, but this is an option for us because it's available, it's vacant, and it's accessible. We don't have time to build a new building. We don't have time to pour money into renovations. That's not an option for us right now. The reality is we need a space that is ready, that is not occupied, where we can bring families in quick. So of course we're concerned about the conditions of those locations. Who are those providers that are providing the services? Because some are good actors and some are not. And so we have to be very careful about that. We don't want to give a contract to anybody because that means that we're not doing our part servicing these individuals and these families. And so just walk us through, if you can quickly, what happens when we have arrivals at Port Authority, where do they go, the time frame in which they stay, and then how do we divert them out? Because I think one of the concerns we collectively have is the burden on the Bronx. How can we work with you to assure that there's going to be a shared responsibility with all of our boroughs and to make sure that the Bronx is not going to be inundated with all of the asylum seekers and there's no attention given to the rest of the city?
So thank you, Borough President. There was a lot to unpack there. There are several points that I'll make, and then also my colleague will piggyback with some of the logistics. I want to first point out that right now we have about 38 emergency sites open for the purposes of fulfilling a population that includes asylum seekers. So that also includes native New Yorkers as well. And so as we're opening up these sites, so that should be understood as well. Out of those 38, 6 are in the Bronx. 6 are in the Bronx. And I say that to speak to your point about one, oversaturation that exists in the Bronx, and the administration paying attention to the fact that there are certain places in the city that have a enormous share, a fair share, and then but we also have to pay attention, as you also mentioned, that this is an emergency, that we're getting buses in every day. We're getting no notice, and we have a wonderful city that includes the right to shelter. And there are ramifications that occur when we're not able, or we don't have the units to house. So we do not have the option to say, no, go someplace else. We must have vacancy available, and so as I stand before you and I say there are 6 in the Bronx, that does not mean there won't be a 7th or another number higher, because the need is still there and we still have to house. But I hope that by saying that number, that I'm communicating that the city as a whole and our Commissioner Jenkins, is paying attention to what is needed throughout the communities, and that's one of the points that I wanted to make. I just wanted to also, before I hand it off to my colleagues, say that, again, this is a moving target. So at the beginning of this crisis, buses were stopping everywhere. Some of them were stopping on nondescript streets. Some of them were stopping blocks from our path centers, our intake centers. Anecdotally, they were given, some folks were given maps, strange addresses. So we did not have an opportunity to have a direct route from Port Authority. Now we're getting something of a heads up, but the numbers prior to that include numbers that were of folks that literally found their way to our PATH intake centers. And so, and PATH, which is, of course, is in the Bronx, and other intake centers that are applicable in terms of adult families and single adults. So that should be sort of thought about, because this process is a new process, and it speaks to how we are developing and streamlining as a city. And as the mayor has said many times, we don't work in silos, and so we have these types of conversations with our commissioners and ourselves, and so now we've arrived at this process, and please share with me.
And I just wanted to add, Commissioner Castro would have also joined us today, but he's actually at the Port Authority. This is commissioners, deputy commissioners, and as my colleague Tom indicated, this is roll up your sleeve, all hands on deck. Just before I go into the details, in terms of when the families comes in, just to share with you the outpour of support that New Yorkers have demonstrated, from providing clothing. We've seen family get off the bus with no shoes, no socks. Individuals just coming in with shoes and socks to provide to some of these families who've been traveling for God knows 2 months, and some of them going through the jungle and experiencing situations like Madam Borough President shared. So when they get to the Port Authority, which we do have, thank goodness for the leadership of Mayor Adams, who's been working with his partners at the state level, at the federal level, with FEMA, just reaching out and putting together what's called a collaboration, a partnership in these times of crisis, to show the world, to show the nation what New Yorkers are made of. When the families get there, the level of transportation they get to the PATH Center, they're greeted now with water. I mean, some of these families haven't had a chance to even have a meal. And this is what's happening. New Yorkers showing what we're made of. We are brave. We get things done, regardless of what the crisis looks like. And I am going to let Tom just share with you more of just what this means, not only to our staff, but to everyone who's just been there and just saying presente. Thank you. Tom.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. So to address the specific question of what happens at the Port Authority, when a bus arrives, typically New York City staff, together with nonprofit staff and community-based volunteers, provide folks with a warm welcome, a warm meal, water. We have EMS and medical on site to provide any immediate aid, and then transport to a hospital or a clinic if necessary, and that has happened many times. The individual undergoes a brief interview in which they're asked if they have a family member, a friend, or a contact in New York that they can stay with. If so, they're helped to get to that location and provided with the resource packet so that they can access city resources. If they don't have a family, friend, or sponsor contact and they want to stay in New York City, they're provided assistance, transportation assistance to get to the shelter intake sites. If it's a family, they'll go to the family intake center, and if it's singles, they'll go to single intake. That's my understanding as of this moment. As mentioned, it's a flexible response, and so things could be changing in real time. And if they want to go out of state, as Deputy Commissioner mentioned, some do. They didn't intend to come to New York. They're provided with reticketing assistance to get to their onward destination, and also resources at that city where they're headed. And so those are the three broad groups into which people fit. And I can say anecdotally that the majority of folks that are arriving on buses to Port Authority do initially choose to remain in New York City and do enter the shelter system.
Thank you. I saw a hand. Community Board 5, and then I'll go to Community Board 8. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of decades ago, when I worked in the homeless shelter system, I went and saw the path on 151st Street, and this is in the 90s, people were lined up around the block then. So I have a couple of questions, please. One is, what's being done to expand staffing and capacity at the DHS entry sites, like Walton Avenue and Franklin and the entry places? What's being done to expand capacity there? And also, could you please step through the details of the open RFP for the hotels that are being opened up, and what is the relationship between these new facilities that are being opened up and the rest of the DHS shelter system? Are they going to be integrated into the shelter system going forward, or is that a standalone system? And then is there any kind of sunsetting for that infrastructure? Thank you.
Well, leave it to the Bronx to get down to the nitty-gritty. Okay. So I'll first speak to PATH, which is obviously a wonderful structure. In fact, the services that are provided there are actually very comprehensive, including medical assessments and DOE connections, and it's the entry point for our families with children. At this point, it is a focus for the agency to make sure that it is fully up and running, that it is running with as much a capacity as possible, which means that we're putting additional resources or people where available right into that center to really start to, well, not start, but to continue to maintain the level of services at that point. You spoke to the open RFP process, and I'm not a contracts expert, but it is one that, and I'll speak just very high level in terms of it being a emergency declaration portion, which is really making this process move a little more quickly, as we all observe that it needs to do, in terms of where the sites are, in terms of whether it's temporary or rolling into another system. That too remains to be a process that's in development. So as we see best practices, I'm sure that this will be a consideration as we move forward in how we maintain and progress on those open RFPs.
Sure, quickly.
Thank you very much. One of the many lawsuits against DHS enjoined the agency to not allow people at the path for more than, I believe, 48 hours. Is there any point, is there any indication at this point that that time threshold may be under stress, and are there plans to address that?
Well, the operations at PATH is a in before 10, out by 4 rule, which really indicates and speaks to the right to shelter that we're under. So if you come in to PATH before 10, you should be housed by 4 a.m. That is the requirement, and any violation of that requirement is self-reported to legal aid, which monitors, and some of you may have read that was an issue for us about a month ago. Our commissioner acknowledged this, our mayor acknowledged this. We had 4 families who in fact were not housed by the 4 a.m. rule, but what should be noted is that 3 families were housed by 8 a.m. and the other by 11. So they did not sleep in the traditional sense and reside at the PATH Center. So that is, I believe, the answer to your question.
Thank you so much. Next we'll have CB8 followed by CB3.
Good morning. Thank you. My question is of a different nature. CB8 is anticipating a homeless shelter opening in 2023. The building is not built yet. We would be very interested in learning who to reach out to and how to reach out regarding families, because currently the model is not a family shelter model that's proposed, but that was before this emergency, which no one sees ending anytime soon. Would it be possible to entertain a different model for that shelter, which happens to be across from Van Cortlandt Park and a wonderful situation for children? Who would we reach out to? And because the building is not built yet, it may be open to a change in the model that would assist this situation.
So I know exactly what project that you're speaking about, and we have purpose-built models. We have models that are longer running with longer runways that to really appeal to a certain population that we can predict in the future we will need these beds, these units, these sites to take care of that population in the future. These are purpose-built, and we do have the opportunity to look at longer-running models and look at placing sites. Various different factors go into it. So that being said, a site that is designated for families with children, adult male, adult female, adult families are done so in particular with those things in mind. As we talk about the asylum seekers today, this is an emergent issue. This is something that we can't predict how many families will be coming in. We're seeing stressors in many areas, including single adults and then also single adult families. So these are stressors throughout the system, and so putting up units in an emergency fashion is really what we're dealing with now. So the contemplation in which that you're speaking about having this flip, that's what we say, flip into a different use, isn't really something that can address what we're talking about today.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, we'll have Community Board 3, followed by Community Board 4. Did you? Okay, sorry. Community Board 4, followed by Community Board 12.
Thank you. Paul Phillips, District Manager, Community Board 4. I have a few questions. So in terms of the locations, how are those locations determined? I guess what's the rationale, and what mechanism is in place to make sure that those locations are equitably distributed, not just across the borough, but across the city? And then my second question is, you talked about the number of sites in the Bronx. Can you quantify the number of people that we're housing at those locations?
Can you repeat the question?
I sure can. So, in terms of the locations that you guys are using to house asylum seekers, what's the process and what's the rationale for choosing those locations? I know there was mention of an RFP, but I guess the second part to that question is, what mechanism is in place on a citywide basis to ensure that those locations are equitably distributed, not only within the borough, but on a citywide basis? That was the first question. And then the second question was related to, you mentioned that there are 6 locations in the Bronx. Can you quantify the number of people total that are at those 6 locations? And families.
I'd like to, for the second question, I'd like to come back to you with that number, not literally come back to you, but just give me a minute to find that particular number. I hope my colleague heard and will be pulling that up as we speak. To speak to the process of citing, again, I keep saying it, but it needs to be repeated many, many times because it has application throughout the process. The fact that this is an emergency and the fact that we are using emergency for lack of a better term, emergency powers to get these sites online, it speaks to the availability. So you ask, what are the citing requirements? They are citing requirements in terms of what they normally are. We would never put anyone into any substandard facility, so they must meet all of the normal requirements for housing unhoused folks within the sheltering system, but we do have to speak to availability. And again, as I said earlier, we're talking about that number 6 right now, but with this uptick, and we don't see it stopping, we will be looking to who, in terms of hotels, that would like to participate and work with us to alleviate this crisis. So that is primarily the citing process. And unfortunately, having that in mind, the secondary part of your question, which was based on equitable citing, it cannot be paramount in what we are seeing, because if there is a facility in this borough that is able and willing and have applied to RFP, then we would go in that particular direction because we need the availability. We cannot have one person, not one family, not one person unhoused. If they're coming to us, we must have that available for them, and that's the real urgency that the agency is working under. And I see some heads nodding, and I thank you for the consideration in understanding that. And when we speak about purpose-built sites, as I spoke earlier, those are the best opportunities to talk about disbursement and equity, but this is a issue that's super, super, super urgent and not subject to some of those other.
So just a real quick comment. So totally understand where you're coming from, but I just want to point out that my district already has one location, and it is also home of the Path Center. So I understand where you're saying that this is emergency, but we have to also look at the bigger picture and the longer haul to acknowledge that areas where you're already seeing oversaturation and we're citing these locations here are going to suffer more, and we need additional resources. So I just want to point that out. That's important for us to keep in mind as well.
And I think that I can add to my earlier comment in that that we've seen in many iterations as our mayor talks about this issue, and as our DSS commissioner talks about the issue in terms of citing, that there is an intent toward equitable citing. We recently had the sponsored by the city hall, and the mayor had talked with elected officials and talked with other groups about having equity. And I think one of the things that was helpful is like just really letting everybody know where everything is located, and because that makes a difference when one person thinks they have a lot, and then they look at another borough and they realize they don't really have a lot of. So.
Thank you, thank you. Community Board 12?
Good morning, and thank you. We are also the location of a site, and I think I want to speak to or ask a question about notification. Friday, my chair had a conversation with the council member, and that following Monday, we had budget consultations. HRA and DHS were the first agencies up. All of you were there. I raised the question about the Sanctuary Hotel, and I even put in a specific address. I won't reveal it because I believe it's now occupied. So my question is, when I raised this issue, I was told that basically I was fibbing, that DHS was unaware of this location, they didn't know anything. When I was texting the councilman, and I said, you know, by the way, do you have the address? He said, no, I don't have the particulars. Whatever I get, I'll send to you. But he just knew that it was on this particular street. I said, fine. I went away last week, Thursday. That's when we were notified. We were given the letter. And I say all this to bring out the point about notification, and actually something that Paul and Ken just spoke to. We keep, and I say this as a New Yorker, as a lifelong New Yorker, lifelong Bronxite, as a proud city employee. I'm a government employee, I'm a municipal employee. We cannot continue to lurch from one crisis to the next. To Ken's point, back in the 90s, you had lines outside of the PATH Center or the EAU, and we didn't know how to deal with it then. We don't know how to deal with this crisis. The previous administration unleashed turning the tide. They were supposed to build 90 new shelters, but they got pushback from certain communities, and they continued to dump on the Bronx. The Bronx, back in 2019, they used to publish a map, and they had it on their website called the Turning the Tide map, which denoted I should clarify, that said what each community board was doing and what every borough was doing. And this was prior to the migrant crisis. So I just think that, you know, we can't continue to deal with this, or we need, I should say, we cannot continue to lurch from crisis to crisis. We have to find some sort of strategy. I know that the mayor was exploring doing away with the mandate. That is a state law. This is the only municipality in the city of New York. And I don't say this to be mean-spirited. I think that we should always, and we should be required to do what we can to help others in need. But the fact that we don't have this tool to fight back, I think really messes us up and continuously gives us this problem where we're lurching from crisis to crisis. The final thing that I'll say on this, the notification, I understand that this is a new administration, this is a new mayor, we have a new borough president, we have new everything, new elected officials. DHS made a promise to us as a community, said we would never use this site again. And they broke that promise. And in breaking that promise, they said, no, George, I want to build a rapport with you. You can't build a rapport and ask people to trust you if you're not going to hold true on your promises. That's how you build trust. And right now, again, I feel like this administration was caught flat-footed. You claim that you're doing all these things. I can read. I read everything. That's what I do all day. I read every newspaper article. You have people at these locations because that's what you said you did. So for you to come down and say, oh, well, you know, we don't know what's coming, that's just poor planning then. Because you should have people there. You're providing services and you're providing monies for the people that are being flown here to be flown back wherever they want to be flown or bused back wherever they want to be bused. And again, I understand that that's a cheaper alternative to actually providing services here in the city of New York and housing them. But again, we just have to be better at this because, and part of that is rolling back that state legislation. That's all. Oh, you want something?
Hi, Chair of Bronx Community Board 12, and I'll be brief. And this is Suicide National Awareness Month, so I think we should recognize that. We just heard a story of a mother who took her life away, and so housing is one aspect of services that we may provide, but I'm really concerned as to mental health services in this district. We already are under-resourced as it is, and so the ability for these asylum seekers, even for our own native homeless people that are living here, to go to another borough to receive these services is really not feasible, and so I'm concerned as to what are the mental health services that are being allocated and funding for that, and how is that going to be put into place for the families, individuals as a whole.
Yeah, I'm gonna, of course, I'll hand it over to you. But I also wanted to speak to some of the things that George mentioned. It was, again, quite a lot to unpack, but I was present at the community board budget consultation meetings, as well as many of you, and I don't say this lightly. Nobody is saying that you're a liar. Nobody says that you fibbed. Nobody said that anything that you said is untrue. That is not the position of DHS, DSS. You know, there's a process. There's a procurement process. And when information gets through that process, we're able to immediately then begin the process of notification. When we are able to know that something's a go, we are immediately reaching out into the community in order to make notifications, and we do that through a particular process. And admittedly, this is, again, an emergency situation. So that process is not the same as, you know, today's process is not the same as yesterday's process, but it is a part of being in constant communication with communities throughout the city. So we are often having conversations that are outside of the community boards, that are stakeholder meetings, that we're community meetings, block parties, any opportunity that we have to communicate that a shelter, or in this case an emergency shelter, is coming, we do that, and we always welcome an opportunity to do that. So if anyone of the folks here have, outside of even your community boards that you represent, if you know that there are stakeholders that have not been contacted and you feel like a conversation needs to be had to better incorporate these shelters into the community, please reach out to us, because we understand that they don't live in a silo. They will be out in the community, they will be participating in activities, they will be in the parks, in the schools, and the shopping centers. And so it is important that we, as a community, as a city community, reach out and make everyone feel welcome. I want to speak to the earlier point about PATH Center, understanding that this PATH Center is, again, yesterday's PATH Center in the 90s is not this current PATH Center. So what did we do as an agency? Of course, I wasn't there, but what did we do? We have a brand new facility not that far from here that is a state-of-the-art model and has been run as such. So even though in the 90s you had something that was representative of a system that was not meeting its mandate, we have a new facility that seeks to meet the mandate. Are there flaws? Are there always flaws in any system? Nothing is perfect. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that it is, but to speak to the point of what I heard was maybe the city is not learning its lesson, and I think this represents an opportunity that the city has learned and continues to pivot and learn from what is previous model to a different model. And in terms of mental health, and really speaking to that in a really humble place. We had an incident in our shelter, and because of social service laws and just decorum, we will not speak directly to that, but we want to make sure that you as a community know that there are assessments that come into place as you enter any intake, and mental health especially is taken into account. We want to make sure that you also know that we make referrals out into the community, so that when, as a whole, a unsheltered population, we don't feel that mental health should be allocated or stifled only into the shelter system. So we do reach out and make referrals into the community, because our goal at DHS is permanency. Our goal is to make sure that anyone who comes into our system unhoused will eventually have a permanent residence, and that they will participate in many other services in the community through referrals, and they will maintain those contacts. And that, of course, includes mental health services. And so that, I think, unpacks some of the questions. If there's anything that I did not speak to, I'm happy to come back to the podium. Michael.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair from Board 12, acknowledging Suicide Prevention Month. It is very tragic, and we hear it every day in terms of Mayor Adams, the commissioner, just really encouraging the importance of getting the help that you need, getting the families, and also the staff. We hear about the staff, the needed support, the trauma that a lot of these families endure in their travel is much greater than anyone can ever imagine. It is tragic, it is unfortunate, and even in the work that we do here at MOIA, at the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, as soon as we learned that this humanitarian crisis, which has affected this entire city, we were there to make sure that not only are the families going to be greeted when they come in at the Port Authority, but I'm going to let Tom share with you just how important it is when we're there with our city agencies. It was the vision and the mission of Mayor Adams and Commissioner Castro, with us having a navigation center, a resource center, where not only is the Department of Mental Health there to assist, but also assist the families, and for us as city staff, the support that we get that is needed as we continue to support and provide the needed resources. So I will let Tom speak more as to the work that is being done from the ground as people are being welcomed into our city and being assisted in their travels. Because again, not everyone may decide to stay here in New York City, but we understand the trauma the families endure is great. The need is there, and we are here to provide all the resources and to make sure that we're providing these resources in an efficient manner. So this is why I'm going to let Tom speak more on the services that are provided, not only from the very beginning at the Port Authority, but also the Navigation Center, and as the mentioned, to continue to track and make sure that this. Tom?
Thank you. I can't respond directly to your question regarding allocation for mental health services in the Bronx, but we can get back to you on that. What I can say is that we have been in close communication with DOHMH as well as NGBV to understand the needs and understand the resources that are available, as Deputy Commissioner mentioned, not only for newly arriving asylum seekers and migrants, but also residents, obviously, and also folks who work at the Navigation Center. And having been there every day, I can say that the DOHMH social workers are working with staff almost as much as they're working with clients and community members. And that conversation is ongoing, but we'll get back to you with respect to the specific allocation.
Before I get to council members, any other community boards, so we can move and wrap this part of the presentation up? Okay. First hand I saw was Council District 16, Councilmember Stevens.
Hey, how you doing? Tyreek Israel again. I just have a few questions. Starting with, so we understand that the shelter systems run a little lighter in the summer months, but I'm kind of worried about the winter months. And when Code Blue becomes a thing and people are now forced to be off the streets and into the shelter system, I want to speak to the capacity that we currently have. I know that Ken brought up a beautiful point about expanding it, but what happens when our shelter systems, because as New York gets colder and the people who were on the street before and opted to be on the street are now forced to be pushed indoors? Do we have enough space to support everybody currently as we are? That's just one of the questions I want to start off with. I also want to get into what are the next steps for the people here. We're talking about the social services that we're providing, mental health services, and all of that is great. But I've spoke with an asylum seeker who ended up in District 16 looking for a job. And he was told that he can go to the auto body mechanic shops on Jerome because they'll hire him without no paperwork and they'll pay him under the table. I can only imagine how that is happening all over the Bronx. So are we doing anything on a workforce front to get these people paperwork so that they can get a job and they don't have to end up in these crevices and these places like the auto body shops on Jerome Avenue, just so that they can provide for their families?
First point about shelters being light in the summer, that's actually not true. We actually see a uptick in the summer as our population with children, families with children, we do see an uptick because of the end of a school year and where a partner might be seeking some type of stability and at the end of the school year feels that there is an opportunity to leave maybe a bad situation, a domestic violence situation or something like that, which is a part of our population that we see. So we do actually see a uptick somewhat during the summer months. Speaking to what I think your point is specifically is, folks in the summertime may be outside and then they need to come inside when it's cold. So we've seen that the mayor and the Adams administration has put a historic investment into safe havens and stabilization beds throughout the city. What are those? These are low barrier points where folks that tend to trend in your question have an opportunity to come into shelter. They have less rules. They have again, it's low barrier, so the curfews, they can come in, there are no curfews as there are in other types of shelter. They can come in for hot meal, they could come in for health services, they can come in for really urgent and immediate care, and certainly urgent care includes getting out of the elements. And so that historic investment has been in conjunction with what you've seen is the encampments that are being taken down with agency collaborations, and then also the end-of-line services that you see throughout the city, where we have outreach that work with, again, the same agencies, multiple agencies at the end of the subway lines where we know some of this activity exists. So in the winter months, there's an opportunity to go into shelter to some of the more reluctant clients at a level which is a low barrier. And speaking to your point about employment, every situation is different. There's a case-by-case basis. I can't speak to specifics. Obviously, asylum-seeking status is different for everyone. But I think that what you're seeing in front of you right now in this presentation, along with Moya and City Hall, of a wholesome grouping of agencies working together. And I think at that point, we want to make sure that folks are not getting taken advantage of. So if they're coming to the Navigation Center, if they're getting an opportunity to talk to the people that they need to talk to, they're not hearing anecdotally through the streets, go to this point, work under the table, do these things. And let's be honest, there are other elements that getting a job is probably one of the better things that you might hear on the street. There might be other opportunities to take advantage of this population. So part of what we're doing and speaking to you and asking for your partnership and working with you is to make sure that this population is not taken advantage of. That we see them and we see their needs, and we don't give the quote unquote streets, as my mother would say, the opportunity to take advantage of them.
I just want to just follow up with just two clarifying questions. So, does the Bronx currently have the capacity to support the asylum seekers and our homeless shelter population that we've seen the population numbers for in the wintertime?
So I get the point that you're making, but I think it's responsible to say we are building capacity. It's important to understand that that's why we're putting up emergency shelter sites, because we need those units. So as we move into the winter months, which is again an opportunity to have folks come into shelter, we have these units, and then we also have, as I referenced, the lower barrier shelters, which again I think speaks to the population, the street population of unhoused folks that you're speaking to.
Just lastly, I'm sorry. Just lastly, you said that the people have to make it to the resource centers, and your colleague mentioned that the resource centers is by appointment only. How do these people get an appointment? Are they calling? Do they have phones to do this? Like, what is the method for them to get that appointment?
So I didn't say that they have to make it to the resource center in order to get help. For our point at DHS, we are assessing right at intake. So they will have the opportunity at intake to get information on these services. In this case, this would include legal services and refer it out. These are also services that, again, reminding everybody, we're making this shifting narrative that includes, now we have the Navigation Center that has similar services to hold, but within itself. So we've been at DHS working through our regular intake process, making referrals as appropriate, but the resource center is another avenue now that it's coming up and running. How do you get an appointment? You get an appointment, and I'm going to let Tom speak to, but there are referrals also as to get appointments. Is that correct?
Yeah, so appointments can be made by shelter staff and also participating community-based organizations that have the scheduler link and an access code. And if any organizations wish to participate and be able to schedule, they can. They can reach out to Moya. There's an email address that I can share. But as mentioned, the Navigation Center is an additional resource to help folks get what they need to ensure that nobody's fallen through the cracks and that those resources exist. And it's meant to provide high volume assistance in the immediate areas, health, education, et cetera.
Thank you. We do have to move on. We do have another presentation after, and we spent a significant amount of time, so I want to be very mindful of that and respectful of our other agencies that are here with us. So if there are no other council member offices that have a question, we will have additional time to talk about this. This is an evolving conversation, as you can tell. And so while we may not have every answer right now, there will be opportunities to speak offline as well as follow up. So I will go with you, and then I'm going to close.
Yes, so my question is, what would the mayor's office like an individual council office? What would you guys like to see an individual council office do to help alleviate the situation? Like, what can our office do, and then what can the council do as a whole?
I will ask my colleague in the hall to if she would like to speak on behalf of the mayor's office in regards to that. What I can speak to the population as a whole and the need for we know that they're coming in really with the clothes on their backs. We know that there are a significant need around donations, and we've seen churches and community organizations that are specifically wanting to participate and donate come forward and even participate in an Adopt a Shelter program and programs such as that. And we've had a bit of success with that because we know, again, that this population needs to be brought into the community, that these folks may be here for a temporary situation, but they are future native New Yorkers, and so we want to make sure that we welcome them, and we've seen that as a city that we've thrown our arms open to welcome the population. And I think in general, what do we seek from council members are your support as we come to you, speaking about new sites that need to open. I think that personally, because I have to make some of these calls, your grace as we speak to you about short runways to opening, and really a full and open dialogue, which and I think before we end, I think it's important to really bring some other folks in and highlight our Bronx Borough Director as well, Jocelyn Bennett, who's many of you must be familiar with, and she makes some of these phone calls as well, and most of them, in fact. And so I think it's important to maintain those communications with our borough representatives as well as leadership, and those are the DHS asks. Okay.
Thank you, and if I could just speak on what can the council members and even the community board do to just help all the families, both the ordinary immigrants that are already here and the newly arrived immigrants. So I just want to just close with these words, which is we all need to work together. If you have families that are coming to your office, reach out to the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. We manage over 200 different languages, and we have what's the Ask Moya, We know a lot of these immigrant families become victims to fraud because they don't get the right information. We are here to provide the right information. We have Action NYC, which is legal referral program, and that's led by Tom, who is here with us today from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. We have the We Speak program, which is also under the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, which teaches how to speak English for free. And we have case management. In case someone calls our Ask Moya, just tell people call 311 and ask for Immigrant Affairs. It goes straight into our hotline. Once you tell them just 311 Ask Immigrant Affairs, we will provide assistance with the appropriate case management. We also will provide assistance with legal referral. We have the assistance for New York Cares to make sure that people receive the needed services for health. And we need to just continue to do what we do best, work in partnership, understand that we have an agency that is here to help and work in collaboration. And we have CAU, which is the Community Affairs Unit. You have a representative in all of your community board meetings. You have Immigrant Affairs, and we're always going to be here to say presente if you need us to come and make a presentation. We are looking, as you know, to provide more direct service as we work with a lot of the different crises. We have the asylum refugee. We also work with the Ukraine refugee crisis, and we're still working with the Haitian relief effort. So there's a lot that Immigrant Affairs does, but feel free to just tell people, call 311, ask for Immigrant Affairs, and again, thank you for giving us the opportunity to just share with you some of the resources, some of the services, and the opportunity to continue to provide the most effective services to the constituents.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mia Sotis and Marika, Tom, Jocelyn, and Valerie. Thank you to DSS, to DHS, to Moya, and the Mayor's CAU. We spent a lot of time talking about this because it is so important. It is emotional, but obviously as a New York and government, we will be responsible, and there's a lot of conversation that is happening as we speak and offline, and so I encourage all of my colleagues to stay connected, and as we get updates and information, we will share that with all of you as well. So thank you all so much for being here today, and we look forward to working together. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Next, I want to call up and recognize and certainly thank you for your patience. We have Dr. Julian Watkins here with us. He is our clinician and health equity advisor on behalf of the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And we have an update on Monkey Pox. And let me first begin by saying that this is something that our city was faced with several months ago. And when we saw the first cases of monkeypox hit New York City, the Department of Health started talking to us and working with all of our health professionals and so many of our organizations, our Director of Health and Human Services, who's here, Dr. Nancy Keck, and we were doing as much as we can in terms of understanding what monkeypox is, how do you contract it, and what can we do to prevent it? What can we do to keep people alive, healthy, well, and safe? And even as we are still dealing with monkeypox, we are making significant progress. We have a vaccination that is available. We are expanding our outreach and education. We're going into communities that are hard to reach. We're working with all New Yorkers, but certainly the LGBTQIA+ community. We're working with sex workers, those that are from domestic and gender-based communities that are victims of a crime. We're talking to everyone, and we're using credible messengers and trusted partners. And so right now, you will talk talk about it, but the Bronx has almost 15% of the citywide cases, and we know that obviously the city started with sexual health clinics in Central Harlem and in Chelsea, as well as Corona, Queens. We were able to get a new site at Lincoln Hospital. We have the Tremont Clinic at 1826 Arthur Avenue that is open 6 days a week. So there are a lot of services, but we still find challenges, particularly within African American gay men and Latino men. That is a challenge because we are finding that that is a population at risk, but for some reason, or many reasons, resistant to getting the vaccine because of stigma, perception, judgment, everything you can think of. And so Dr. Julian Watkins is here to give us an overview of what has been done from the health department, what we are doing, and how we move forward. But we need all of your offices in terms of collaboration. All of you have been a part of our outreach and efforts to get information out, but most importantly, and we are trying to keep people safe. So I thank you, Dr. Watkins, for being here, and you can begin with your presentation. Hope I didn't steal some of your shine. I apologize for that.
You stole a little, but it's quite all right. Thank you, Madam Borough President, and all the community advocates here. Nice to meet you. I'll hop right in. My name is Julian. I'm an internal medicine doc. I also do health equity, and I work in the Center for Health Equity and Community Wellness. I guess I need to lift it up better? Okay. So just to kind of give us an understanding of where we are nationally and internationally, the United States has been the epicenter for the last few months for this outbreak. I'll be using, it's commonly referred as Monkey Pox, but we also use the acronyms MPXV to kind of minimize and reduce the use of the term monkey. But the United States has been the epicenter. And as the borough president referred to, New York City, we have been the epicenter within the epicenter, originally making up over 20% of the cases nationally. Thankfully, New York City, our percentage of the cases is coming down. If you look on the screen, you can see a map of the 50 states and just see the deeper blue states and territory, the color coding. The deeper blue represents higher case counts. New York City and New York State are among some of these other larger states with large urban populations. This is a visual representation. This data is available on the Health Department website. It's updated every Thursday. So this is a representation of the daily cases. So there's multiple things going on there. Look at the bottom. This is over time from left to right. And the light blue lines going vertically, these are the daily case counts. The solid line, that darker line, represents averages. So you can kind of just put it all together and see where we have been and where we're going. So you can see at the end of July and early August, you can see where our case counts, nearly 100 folks were testing positive for MPXV a day. But as you can see right now, going further to the right of the screen, you can see in September, cases have definitely come down. The curve has been flattened for various reasons. Just to kind of unpack total cases by borough, Manhattan, the borough of Manhattan had the majority of cases. These are folks residing in Manhattan, followed by the borough of Brooklyn, and then the Bronx had the third highest case totals, then followed by Queens and Staten Island. Looking by demographic groups, we don't have the data broken down borough by these demographic groups, but you can make those connections based on the populations living in the Bronx. So looking by race and ethnicity, as folks can see, folks who identify as Latinx, or Hispanic have made up the majority of cases across New York City, with over 1,100 cases. Folks who identify as Black or African American have been the second most impacted group, followed by folks who identify as white, and so forth. And when we look at sexual orientation, I do want to note, when we talk about sexual orientation, we report it as LGBTQ to acknowledge that trans identity is not a sexual orientation, it's a gender identity. The majority of cases, folks self-identify as members of the LGBTQ community, but we also have folks who identify as straight. Also just acknowledging that sexual orientation doesn't necessarily govern sexual activity and behaviors. So who is at risk? I think it's important to name this up front. Anyone with skin can potentially be infected with this virus. Anyone of any sexual orientation or gender identity or race or ethnicity can get this virus, but it is important to raise awareness that currently in the United States and and across the 5 boroughs of New York City, that certain communities have been disproportionately or highly impacted. In the social and sexual networks of folks who identify as gay, bisexual, or other men who have sex with men, either cis or trans, those communities and the sexual networks have been impacted. Also, folks who identify as of other trans experience, or gender nonconforming folks, non-binary folks are also in these networks and communities and have also been impacted. Also, it's important to note that we do know some of the risk factors are more contact with more people has increased risk for infection or exposure to the virus, and so folks who have multiple partners or folks who meet folks anonymously or may not know a lot of the background, there is a higher risk. How does this spread? In the news and the media, everyone's talking about sexual transmission, but when it really comes down to it, this virus is spread from direct contact, skin-to-skin contact from person to person. Sexual transmission, there's a lot of skin contact, so that's a mode, but it's skin contact with someone who is infected. We also know that this virus can spread by fomites, or these are inanimate objects such as clothing, bedding, or other items that someone who's infected has come in contact with. Repeated exposure to these inanimate objects or clothing, bedding, etc., can spread the virus. We also know that the virus can be isolated in large respiratory droplets. It's not aerosolized. It's not like just floating in the air when people talk. Sputum, spit kind of comes out, and the virus can be isolated there. But for a respiratory transmission, there would need a lot of close contact in poorly ventilated spaces. What we do know about the spread, we're learning more as this current outbreak goes on. But what we do know is that primarily folks are contagious or spreading the virus when they do have symptoms. Really trying to understand what the risk of transmission is before the development of symptoms and after the resolution of symptoms. But what we do know is if we swab the lesions, a lot of virus is on these lesions, and so that's the primary point of spread. We know that a person is contagious during the course of that symptomatic period, and to understand what that symptomatic period when it begins and ends, from the initial development of the sores to the resolution or healing of the sores. So it's not just enough for them to start cooling down and have a scab. That scab has to heal and fall off and have a fresh layer of skin underneath where the lesion was. The duration of the infection can last from 2 to 4 weeks, and so that range, just thinking about the social considerations of someone who's infected, 4 weeks of being contagious can have a major impact and cause folks to have to isolate for a long time. So what are the symptoms? So when we typically are talking about MPXV, it's spoken of a dermatologic illness affecting the skin. And so folks are looking for rashes and sores. The description varies because the rashes or these sores kind of have a life cycle. They start off generally as a flat red rash on the skin that can develop into an organized or a distinct looking lesion. It's described as pimple-like, it's raised, looks like it has something inside, usually like a light colored or pus appearing material. It has a typical look. It has what we call an umbilication, or think belly button, has a little dent in the middle. If you have something that looks like this and it's developing, consider MPXV. It can develop on particular parts of the body. Typically, in prior outbreaks, it's occurred on the face, the hands and feet, and the mouth. But in the current outbreak, we've seen it in some of the more sensitive areas. We've seen it in what we call the mucosal areas, or the pink parts of the body. So in the mouth, in the genitals, or the anus. And when it's in these more sensitive mucosal areas, the pink parts can be extremely painful and lead to hospitalization. The rashes can be sore, itchy, and painful, and as I said, can last up to 4 weeks. Over the course of illness, new rashes can develop and heal, so they don't all appear at once, which is an important feature. And then more generalized symptoms. So it's not just on the skin. A lot of folks have been developing these viral, like flu-like or COVID-like symptoms. When folks are infected, your immune system activates, and so you get the fever. Folks are having swollen lymph nodes, tender lymph nodes. Folks are also having symptoms: headache, sore throat, muscle aches, backache, exhaustion, chills. So there's a lot of kind of systemic or total body symptoms that can happen, and those symptoms can develop at the time that the rash develops or even before the rash develops. So what can we do to protect ourselves? So we'll talk a little bit going forward about what we can do to protect ourselves and our community. We spend a lot of time focusing on the biomedical interventions. We talk about treatment, we talk about vaccines, but there's other things that we can do, similar to COVID-19, things that we can do to reduce our risks. So what we do know as the outbreak is open, a lot of folks are getting it through meeting folks and through sexual or intimate contact. So really reducing the number of sexual partners that folks have. We've seen that lead to the reduction in cases. Also, for folks avoiding certain social places, may not be sexual contact, but enclosed areas, poor ventilation. Folks may or may not have shirts on or other things. That can be something that folks can do to reduce their risk. And I think the other part is just having the conversation. There's not a lot of discussion. I think sex is stigmatized in general, but just normalizing conversations and the fact that sexual health is part of our overall general health. The health department has a lot of resources on our website for folks if they want to learn more, with guidance on how to keep themselves safe, guidance, educating yourself and learning more about this thing is one of the other things that folks can do to be able to recognize symptoms. There's a lot of vaccination news, as the borough president shared earlier, but really for folks who want updates, folks can text Monkey Pox to 692-692. For folks who want updates in Espanol, you can text Monkey Pox ESP to 692-692, and folks get notifications of alerts and other updates. So in vaccination news, the city has adopted the intradermal vaccination strategy to expand access. There's a national shortage of the vaccine, and so there's two methods of administration. Classically, you can get the vaccine subcutaneous, sub meaning below, cutaneous the skin. So beneath the layers of the skin, in that space, in like the fatty space, you can get that injection. But then we also know that there's another mode of administration called intradermal. Intra meaning between, dermal, the surface layers of the skin. So this intradermal administration, our skin is actually one of our largest organs and a major part of our immune system. And the surface of the skin contains special immune cells. And so this intradermal administration, with a smaller amount, you can actually produce a similar immune response. And in adopting that method, which New York City has, in addition to subcutaneous, we've been able to expand the number of folks who we can vaccinate. The health department has also been working with local and state partners to advocate for more vaccines to come in and to make more appointments available and again to expand access. So as the borough president said, the Tremont Action Center was opened up a couple weeks ago in the Bronx. Last Friday, over 50,000 new vaccine appointments have gone live, which will be open until up through the beginning of October. And we've also expanded access, which we'll talk about for eligibility in the next slide. As the access had been very limited because of the limited supply and following the local data. But as this goes on, we want to make sure that we can expand based on the data and also based on folks' needs. And so, right now, folks who identify as gay, bisexual, or other men, cis or trans, who have sex with other men, and or folks who identify as transgender, folks who identify as gender nonconforming or gender non-binary, who have multiple or anonymous partners within the previous 2 weeks, those folks are eligible to get the vaccine. But we recently expanded eligibility to folks who engage in sex work for various reasons, regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation. That's a new inclusion. Or eligibility, and also we expanded to people under 18. So the vaccine has been around for a few years, but in response because of the emergency response, the FDA has opened up that eligibility. So people under 18 can be vaccinated there's some state laws for consent and parental consent. Can't speak to that because I am not a state legal expert. But for some folks who should really consider getting vaccinated, folks who have partners who have symptoms of monkeypox or MPXV, or who have symptoms consistent or who are known to be diagnosed, folks who meet folks on social platforms or in certain types of social situations. We encourage folks to meet partners. And then finally, for folks who have certain conditions, so folks living with HIV, particularly those who are not virally suppressed or newly diagnosed, we're encouraging folks to consider getting vaccinated against MPXV. There's some other medical conditions that folks should consider, specifically folks with weakened immune systems. So folks who have certain underlying illnesses that can affect the immune system, or certain folks who are on certain medications. And then also folks who have certain skin conditions, such as eczema or atopic dermatitis, a chronic inflammatory skin condition. So now we'll talk about vaccines. This is a visual representation of a lot of work that has happened over the last couple months. Over 100,000 vaccines have been administered in New York City. That's a monumental task that was only accomplished with folks like everyone in this room and with the participation of community advocates, not just the DOH. I just want to acknowledge that. And so we are publishing some really important vaccine equity data, which personally, as someone who works in health equity, also from my background, from my personal background as a member of the community, and also as a Black Latinx person, this is all important. It helps drive our efforts. So it can be a bit complicated, but the quick breakdown is the gray or that lighter color at the top represents an estimate of folks who would be eligible. This is kind of driving how much do we think a community would need. The purple at the bottom is the percentage of the overall doses administered. So you want to meet at least the expectation or exceed it, and that's how you can surpass or make sure that you get the most folks this intervention. So if we look at race and ethnicity, you see folks who identify as Asian or Pacific Islander. As an estimate that about 7% of the 7% of all vaccines are estimated to need to go to that community, but they've received about 10.5%, which is great. When we look at folks who identify as Latinx, it was estimated 16% of the vaccines would need to be distributed to that community, but there's been more, which is great. Looking at the cases, you would want to get those numbers down. And looking at folks who identify as white, you can see those you can see that it was estimated about 45% of the doses should have gone to that community. They've received 47.8, which is great. When we look at the Black or African and African American community, we see a huge disparity. So when we look, it's estimated that around 31% of the vaccine should have gone into folks who identify as Black or African American, but they've only received roughly almost 13%. This is a new inequity that developed within the last few months. So this is something that we're definitely working on, and we want to lead with that and be truthful and honest about what's going on. Looking at Borough, you can see similar historic patterns or trends. You can see that Manhattan has been vaxxed up. They've kind of met the expectation. Brooklyn as well. But when we look at Queens is under-vaxxed a little bit. By estimates, but looking at the borough of the Bronx, Bronx has only received slightly over half of what we expected or think that the Bronx would need to receive, and Staten Island has received less than that share as well. We've also seen some vaccine inequities by age. The majority of cases are occurring in folks 25 to 44 years old. So it's good that we've definitely exceeded the expectations of the estimated need in those age groups. When we look at the different edges of age, so folks who are younger and then folks who are older, we still have some inequities vaccinating those folks as well. Particularly looking at folks who are 18 to 24, and folks 45 to 64. Okay, so for the next couple of slides, I don't want to take up too much time, just not rush through, but breeze through. So what to do if you have symptoms. So this slide is for folks who you wake up and you see the new lesion, you see the rash, and you don't know what to do. The first thing to do, take a deep breath. There are steps that you can follow, and there's things that you can do on resources for you in New York City. So we're encouraging folks, if you have a healthcare provider, call them. You want to make the diagnosis so you can know the course of action. If you don't have a healthcare provider, you can call 311 to find a provider. You can go to a local health and hospital site, or you can go to one of the health department sexual health clinics. We're seeing folks in those clinics. We also have treatment in the sexual health clinics. Talk to your provider, let them know what's going on, have that open conversation. What are your exposures? Why are you concerned? Do you know someone who had it? These are all things that are really important. And in that time where you don't have the diagnosis, it's important to act as if you do so that you can break those chains of transmission. You know, it's better to know and be cautious versus to inadvertently spread it to someone. So we're encouraging folks to avoid physical contact with other folks until you've been checked out, to stay home, similar to the lessons of COVID-19, physically isolate, keep 6 feet. You want to cover your mouth and you want to cover any lesions so that you don't inadvertently spread it to someone. If you do have to leave home again, cover your mouth or cover your lesions. We also have guidance for if you live with someone, how you can keep folks at home safe. How do you wash clothes? How do you live with someone and keep them safe? And also, we are doing contact tracing. The health department, one of the core functions of the Department of Health is to call contacts of a known case, to identify those folks, to get them resources that they need so that we can break these chains of transmission. Okay, so if you have been diagnosed with monkeypox, you can take another deep breath because there's other things that are out there that we can do. So there is a treatment out there called TPOXX or Techoviramat. This is a medication that has been out since 2019 that was developed to treat smallpox. Smallpox is a distant relative of MPXV. Contrary to popular thought, monkeypox is actually not related to chickenpox and some of those other unfortunately animal-named pox viruses. Monkeypox is related to smallpox. So we've had treatments for it. Smallpox is a virus that was eliminated from the United States and most of the globe through vaccination. So we have effective vaccinations to treat prior relatives, and we have these vaccinations to treat vaccinations and treatments for monkeypox. So there is a treatment out there. It's readily available. New York City has been leading the country in administering the doses and also educating providers, letting them know how they can get it, and making sure that equity is part of that process as well. Another thing, as a primary care doc, if you are sick, you got to drink your water. When you have fever, when you have chills, and when you're fighting an illness, most folks are hospitalized because they're dehydrated. They lose so much fluids and they don't even know it. So staying hydrated. The other thing, take care of the sores and the rashes. It may be scary to look at it. It may be, but you got to make sure you take care of it because you want that to heal and you don't want scarring. These things, if you scratch too much, you can actually cause inflammation and lead to scarring. Folks can have hypo or low pigmentation. You get lightening of the skin, or you can get hyperpigmentation, darkening of the skin. So there's just something to really be mindful of. For folks who have, who overwhelmingly, most folks do not need hospitalization, do not need prescription meds for the infection. But for folks who do have the pain and the discomfort, there are over-the-counter and home remedies that folks can use. We encourage folks to go to our website. We have a more extensive list or comprehensive list of things that folks can do if they are infected. But for some of the skin lesions, for those skin symptoms, calamine lotion, petroleum jelly, other kind of things to help keep the skin, to help promote skin healing, cooling lotions, etc. Folks can take oatmeal baths and other things also to help with symptoms. This is the last slide, and I guess we can open up for questions. So what can we do? What can I do? What can you, as a concerned Bronxite and New York City resident? The best thing that we can do is educate people. Knowledge is power, and what we want to do is really help get the message out. We want to raise an awareness of an issue. This is an issue that we should all be concerned with, but we don't want to raise the alarm bells and have folks panicking, because this is not a thing that the whole city is at risk for. We've seen that it's been isolated in certain communities, but we want to support those communities so that we can stop the transmission so that it doesn't spread beyond and become something that can't be contained. So supporting folks and learning, educating ourselves, signing up for updates, letting other folks know that they can sign up for updates. We have palm cards. Folks can see this is a large representation of it. On my way from the train, one of the community-based organizers tried to hand me one. I was like, oh, no thanks, helped review that. So we're out engaging, sharing those resources. sharing accurate information, just letting folks know if you hear stigma, if you hear homophobia, you hear transphobia, to stop it, nick it in the bud. We are neighbors. This is affecting friends, family members, our friends and neighbors. And the reality is, the last few years have been hard for all of us, and for this community with deep roots in the city to be affected disproportionately is tough. It's tough on everyone. So just being aware of that, and if folks are experiencing isolation or feelings of experiencing mental health issues or behavioral health issues, to really let folks know that there are resources available. Folks who have difficulty getting food as well, there are resources available. And I can stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Watkins, for the comprehensive presentation and overview of the city's efforts to address monkeypox. So the one thing I do want to acknowledge as I get to questions from my colleagues is that when we first learned about monkeypox and we had pop-up vaccination sites, remember the challenge we had at the onset was the federal government's lack of response. CDC did not give us sufficient vaccines here in the state and the city, and we were essentially advocating. We had our senators and members of Congress, Governor Hochul, so we started to get them in batches. We would get 50,000, then another 80,000, and then the online portal would go public, and then everyone would be able to go and get appointments. But of course, the system got overwhelmed. It crashed. We had some glitches in the system. Some people got appointments versus those that did not. But I want to acknowledge the efforts from the health department. We were able to get Bronx High School of Science as our pop-up site over 4 Sundays, over 4 weeks. And when we visited the site, we saw a lot of the residents did not necessarily look like the Bronx, and many of them did not reside in the Bronx, because we welcomed everyone from other places, other counties as well, and that happened. And so we were very adamant in our conversations, Dr. Keck and others leading these conversations, to make sure that we went into those communities and used trusted partners and organizations on the ground that have the ability. The LGBT Center here in the Bronx, Destination Tomorrow, some of our bids and merchants associations, the Chamber of Commerce, Amita Care, Osborne. These are organizations that work within the LGBTQIA+ community and have the ability, the continuity, they have the relationships to connect. And so that was the first challenge, being able to identify those credible messengers. But I do acknowledge that that has since happened, and now that's a reason why we're getting more vaccines, and the positivity rates and the infection rates are going down. I do acknowledge that, which is a good thing. And so I guess the challenge for us is, how do we continue to advocate, to promote, to educate, to get out to those communities that are a little resistant and hesitant, and do more outreach, and how can we use our community boards and our council members to get that message across? Because my concern and my worry is now with the fall season and us getting back to normal, and what that means in a post-COVID-19 world, I don't want the infection rates to go back up, right? Because if we, lose focus and this is not a priority, we go on to the next thing. It's Legionnaires, it's this, it's that. It's always something in this city. And I don't want to forget about monkeypox, because it's still around, just like COVID is still around. So what can we do to help support your department and your team to make sure that this is on our radar and we're sharing information as best we can?
Thank you for that. It's a very difficult situation, and I think I just do want to acknowledge this bit about mistrust, to acknowledge that if communities are seeing and experiencing what has happened, they've experienced the barriers and the difficulties that we've had. They've seen the lines that we set up in the Bronx and saw people who didn't look like the Bronx there. Just acknowledging that does contribute as well, that frustration of being turned away. So just acknowledging that it has been a rapidly evolving situation. I think one of the best things that we can do is really think about community health. I think in the country we kind of focus a lot on individual impact, but we really have to start thinking about how do we keep our community safe. Winter is coming. Talk about COVID. the last 2 winters were really tough, right? So what can we do to keep ourselves safe, our families, our communities, talking about winter safety? There's COVID coming, there's a new COVID vaccine out that's been updated, that's really effective. There's flu vaccines that are out. We've seen that in the last couple years, mask wearing has really reduced flu in the city, but we are seeing flu is on the rise. We've seen flu on the rise in other places. So it's what can we do to keep ourselves safe? Monkey Pox is part of that as well, bringing in the fact that part of sexual health care is part of all health care, and it's having folks get testing for your STIs, get your HIV testing. The Bronx has some of the highest rates of HIV, right? So it's about this bigger approach and how we can have the conversation, get the checkups, do the thing, get the vaxes. And I think for the Bronx and a lot of other places, understanding that folks do have particular needs, the way that we engage and talk with folks. Maybe this presentation may not be what someone needs to hear to get boosted against, to get vaccinated against MPXV or COVID, right? Sometimes it's going there and talking to folks, meeting them where they are. So we talking with community-based orgs to give them techniques, how to talk to folks and look at the bigger context of the picture. So again, to call folks in and not call out any of the hesitancy. Call them in and see how can we connect. But events like this, bringing in partners, having a conversation is a big part of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Watkins. And we'll make sure that all of your offices get a copy of the presentation that was shown to you today. Any members from our community boards? Any questions? CB 8? Okay, I see you.
Thank you. That was very informative. We have a CBA health committee. We're looking to have someone come out from the health department to discuss monkeypox and give a similar presentation at an upcoming meeting. Would I reach out to you? Is there someone?
We can share a link. There's a link online to register for health department speakers for a variety of topics.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other community
Boards? Okay, council members? Excellent. Dr. Watkins, you did great. Only one question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your work on behalf of the administration. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, we are coming to a close. What was on the agenda from the Health Department as it relates to pest control is no longer on today's agenda, so that will be at an upcoming Borough Board meeting. But I do have a couple of announcements I want to share with you, and first and foremost, just saying thank you all for your patience in being here today, running my first Borough Board meeting. Certainly want to make sure that it is pleasing for all of you and your teams, and really our efforts to work with all of you as partners. As you can see, there is a lot of things that are happening across the city, and we will do our best to make sure that you are provided information that is up to date, that is accurate, so you can share it with your board members and your constituents, because this information is important, and we want to make sure you are prepared when people ask you questions about some of these sites as it relates to asylum seekers and migrant families in our schools, the families that are enrolling their children in our local school districts. All of this is happening on an ongoing basis. So I want to thank you for your service as our district managers and our board chairs and the members from our council members. Thank you to the staff and all of you for your incredible support. Our Director of Borough Operations is Marisol Halpern, who has been in the office and who contacts many of you. We get up-to-date information on so many things that occur, from disasters, so many emergencies. There was a crane that fell the other day in Bedford Park. I know you all saw that. A number of fires and emergencies that we have across the borough. Marisol gets all that information, and we share that as best we can because there is a lot that's going on. I want to introduce our new senior advisor for the office, formerly our Director of Community Boards, Tom Lucania. And Tom is in his new role now as our senior advisor. So I want to say thank you to Tom for agreeing to serve in this role. And of course, we know we may have taken him out of the unit, but he's still working with all of you as we can, because we do want to make sure that the Office of Community Boards is still functioning. We've been able to appoint many members to the community boards that have started their meetings this month. Some were reappointed and some were appointed by myself or your local council member, and that is ongoing as we begin the new process. But what I hope you understand is our efforts to be very deliberate and very strategic in making these appointments. We don't select just anyone. Everyone puts in an application. They go through an interview process. We look beyond the actual application as to who we put on our boards, who represents the interests and the priorities of the communities that all of you serve, and we serve collectively. And so we have to be very strategic about it. We've also been able to do a lot of recruitment at the high school level, because you're now able to join the community board as young as 16 years of age. And the only challenge we have with our young people are they usually leave us to go to college. And that's an okay problem to have, because we want them to go to college, and we always welcome them. If they want to come back after they finish, they can always come back and join the board. So I'm very, very excited about the youth component of our office and what we're doing to expand on that, because a lot of my work in previously has always been about youth development and youth advocacy. And in many of the events that we have held in these 9 months and will continue to hold, a lot of celebrations of culture and diversity, we always have a youth honoree now, which you'll see, which we love. We're honoring young people in elementary, middle school, high school, and college. And think about, a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old being honored for being like their class president or president of the Student Government Association. That's an incredible feeling for a young person, and we want young people to experience that. So we're doing things a little different. We're adding some creativity and innovative approaches to many of our units now, and you're going to see that. On your desks in front of you, all of you were given our strategic plan. So I just want to let you know that's hot off the press. And the strategic plan is something that is mandated by the New York City Charter. Every 4 years, each borough president must submit by September 1st a strategic policy plan for their borough for the next 4 years. So essentially, this is our blueprint. This is our foundation. This is our vision. And all of our unit directors and staff in the office put so much labor into this document that's over 200 pages. It's 200 and almost 30 pages of every priority you can think of, from housing to affordability to economic development, climate change, environmental justice, transportation, everything you can think of. And so I ask you to peruse it at your own leisure and convenience. And it also can guide all of you as you are in budget and consultations with your members as we gear up for FY24. And you send all of those wonderful lists of Reso A's to our office and your council members. But we just wanted to give you an understanding of what we've been working on. This document is really a labor of love. 9 months of coming up with the best ideas and many of the conversations we've had together. And I must say, 5 borough presidents, we were the first to submit it on time, September 1st, because we know the rules that need to be followed and we wanted to adhere to that. But it really is a working document that gives us an understanding of how we move this borough forward. You all have been fighting the good fight for a very long time. And when you think about initiatives like congestion pricing and what that has on this borough, on traffic, 95, the Bruckner, the Bronx River, the Deegan, what it has on our pollutions and air quality and noise and construction and asthma rates and diabetes and everything that we have dealt with for years, right? And so when you look at options like capping the Cross Bronx, it can make a difference for the air that we breathe. And so those are things that are in the document. We talk about ferry service, the Metro North expansions. We talk about the intersection of culture and education and everything in between. So I hope you will take the time to peruse that. Also sharing with all of you that we have with us Department of Finance, Department of Education, I believe, are here with us. We're going to have a presentation this month. That's probably going to be another hour and a half, because we can talk forever about DOE and about school budgets, classroom size, school-based health clinics, and what we're doing to educate our children. We have some upcoming events. It's Hispanic Heritage Month as we speak, and we are having a Hispanic Heritage Month event on Thursday, October 20th. We will share that information. We are identifying a location as we speak. Also in October, Italian Heritage Month on Thursday, October 13th at the Shift Family Great Hall in the Bronx Zoo, and that's going to be in the evening at 6 p.m. We also have in November is Puerto Rican Heritage Month, and that is Thursday, November 15th. Location is to be determined. We're going to recognize Puerto Rican heritage. And let me finish with my events. Let me go to December, the annual Borough President's Tree Lighting and Winter Wonderland. I think I have to dress up. I don't know, not sure. That's going to be Thursday, December the 8th, right here at Lou Gehrig Plaza on 161st Street in the Grand Concourse. And so those are the upcoming events for October and November and December. Subject to change, we will probably add some new ones. We are gearing up for the recruitment of our community advisory boards for health and hospitals, H&H. From North Central, Jacoby, Lincoln Hospital, Gotham Morrisania, Gotham Belvis, Gotham Tremont, which is new, that's Tremont and Webster. That's all? That's it. Okay. We have lots of vacancies on our CABs. Community advisory boards are under the jurisdiction of H&H. We make recommendations, as does health and hospitals. These are usually advocates, community residents, just like community boards, live, work within a particular area, and we have had trouble in the past of recruitment. Usually we look to community boards and council members for your health person, your health advocate, your Health and Human Services Committee, and some of the members, as well as your chair, as potential options. We're looking for nurses, doctors, clinicians, those that may work in FQHCs, in health centers. These are the people on our CAB that will be our voices as it relates to everything health within the H&H system. So Lincoln, Jacoby being trauma centers, dealing with a lot in terms of volume of cases and clients and patients, but all of the external partnerships as well. And so we have this flyer because we are beginning the application process for community advisory boards, and we need your help. There are a number of vacancies on each of the CABs that I described, from Gotham as well as our public hospitals. So we're going to be looking to you for support in that regard. Next Wednesday, which is September 29th, we are having a Veterans Resource Fair. We have a Borough President's Veterans Task Force in our office, and we are having a Veterans Fair to raise the level of awareness for the support that our veterans truly need. So we're partnering with organizations. We're going to be at our Rotunda in Veterans Memorial Hall, right here at 851 Grand Concourse, next Wednesday, September 20, is it Wednesday or Thursday? Sorry, I apologize, it's Thursday. Thursday, September 29th. Sorry. Thursday, September 29th, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. It's entitled Healing Through Connection, and we are partnering with the Bronx VA Hospital. You all understand challenges we face with veterans, several thousand that are homeless, living with post-traumatic stress disorder. We have a Bronx Veterans Mental Health Court right here on 161st Street. We have to do more to support veterans every day. So this is our effort to provide resources, programs, resources, and understanding of some of the services that are available through the VA, through the State Veterans Affairs, as well as City. Commissioner James Hendon is a Bronx resident and a veteran himself, and he leads the city's Department of Veterans Affairs. I think that may be it. Yes, I have lots. Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Anyone have any questions for me, per se? I know I hit you with a lot today. Hope it was very productive. Let me just make sure, go through all of my notes, okay. Oh, I also want to introduce other members of our team. So you've met Marisol, you know Tom, you know Nancy Keck is our Director of Health and Human Services. I want to also acknowledge David Kulabali is our new Director of Community Services. That was the position formerly led by Tracy McDermott for many, many years. David Kulabali and his team are doing a lot of the work with Moya and DSS. He has been at Port Authority every single weekend at 6 and 7 a.m. meeting buses, because a lot of times you hear that many of these families are from Colombia, from Venezuela, from Texas, from Mexico, but they're also from West Africa too. Many of them are African and they do not speak the dialect, and David does. So David's been our point, working with Tom on navigating this whole process. It is a lot to take in, it's a lot to absorb and have to make these decisions, and I hear all of you, and I do feel like, you know, we're learning and leading at the same time, because New York City has never experienced this ever before. And so as we develop the plan, we're leading at the same time. And we can do that, right? It's not impossible, but I just want everyone to be as patient as possible. The notifications, we're trying our best, but we are going to do our part, but I am not going to allow our borough to be inundated. I assure you of that. I have a call tomorrow with my borough presidents to talk about what we're doing collectively as borough presidents, and we're talking to all the council members about our strategy, because one thing I will not do, the death by suicide that we had in one of our shelters hit me really hard. That was a mother, she had children, and now we're working to get her children back to Colombia, right? And I think about that, and we don't know what she endured getting here and what caused her to take her life. But that's a real reality that people are facing that may be suicidal. We cannot take them from one traumatic situation to another, and we cannot further dehumanize them and victimize them. So we're not going to put them in inhumane conditions that are not conducive just to satisfy the law, right? And so that is my concern. I don't want people necessarily in spaces that are not conducive with running heat and hot water and basic necessities, right? And so that is something that we are not only questioning, but we're asking those questions, because I know that that's what you ask of us to do. And so that is something that we are taking care of. In addition, yes, oh my goodness, couldn't forget that. Our Director of Capital Programs is also here, Betty McCrae Walker, many of you know. Betty will run the workshops that we do starting October. We're going to start the Reso A process for all of our CBOs, not-for-profits, to begin reaching out to us on funding for the next cycle. We work with all the council members in January and put together our priorities, and then we work on the budget for the next cycle. The final thing I'll say, Hurricane Fiona efforts are underway. We're working with the Hispanic Federation, Acacia Network, other organizations on the ground. We were with Mayor Adams yesterday in Brooklyn. An announcement was made. There has been a team deployed from Emergency Management, NYPD, Moya, HPD, Parks, DDC, DOB have all been deployed to Puerto Rico this week, and we are likely going to go to the DR next week. We're talking to the president of Puerto Rico, the president of DR, who was supposed to be here tomorrow, but for obvious reasons is not. But we're trying to let them lead and guide us on what they need, because we learned a lot from Hurricane Maria 5 years ago. A lot of mistakes we made, we're not going to make them again. We know when we start collection efforts, we're going to get an overwhelming amount of collections. Everybody comes from a good place. So we'll get the water, we'll get the, things like that. But for right now, we're asking people to do financial contributions to Hispanic Federation and to other credible, trusted messengers and sources. So on the city's website, www.nyc.gov, there's a press release. It has a few organizations that have already been on the ground that we are adding our name to in terms of credibility. And then at some point when we begin collection drives, we will let everyone know. So we're just in a pause situation right now because we'll get it. The main thing right now for the island of Puerto Rico is power. 70% of the island still has no electricity. So we are asking if anyone knows folks that can donate solar lamps, generators, right? We need those types of equipments. So we're working with the electeds, we're working with others on trying to see if we can get that. But for right now, the money is important because these groups are on the ground. So they are providing the supplies to the supermarkets. We're working with the hospitals, the nursing homes, the rehab centers, areas of the island that we cannot get to, trying to get out there, and we have buildings, contractors going down to help with the electricity and the power restoration. That's super important right now. You saw the video footages of bridges washing away, right? So there are literally islands that are crippled where you can't get to. So it's dangerous to go down, so we're waiting. Elected officials are talking about a delegation in the near future, so that is something we'll share as well. So stay tuned for updates on Hurricane Fiona relief efforts, and I want to thank all of you for being here today. This has been a great Borough Board meeting, and I feel like we've gotten a lot of information. I know it's a lot to soak in, but if you need our help, any follow-up, please reach out, Marisol, Tom, Nancy, David, Betty, whoever you have already been talking to, please feel free to reach out to us as well, okay?